came first to Cuba, and then
Yeah, but that's, you'll be repeating it.
I know, but maybe I didn't record part of that. Came first to Cuba, stayed in Cuba for a few months. That was in, and then you went, showed the man your money belt. Said you wanted a tourist, 6-month tourist visa in July. So you went to Miami or Fort Lauderdale, no, Key West.
Changed from Havana to Key West.
Okay.
And from Key West by train all the way to New York City. One thing that happened in that trip, in fact, some of the sites, when I drive down to Florida, I remember some of them. One particular bridge, I remember, that will remember for as long as I live. It was hot in the afternoon, and they will study on that bridge, and I go see the trucks and the cars go by on that road. Yeah. And every time I pass by, the bridge to the left. Yeah. And I tell her, this is where we were that afternoon. But anyway, somewhere in Georgia, we stopped. The train stopped. Stopped several places, but I remember this particular stop. And I was hungry, because all they served on the train was sandwich. Well, I guess there was a dining room, but I don't know where it was. Yeah. Or even if there was one. Yeah. So this conductor, or whatever you call him,
the guy in charge of the train,
he came around with a huge basket, serving sandwiches, cakes, soda, and so on. So I would get 1 or 2 sandwiches, soda, and some candy or cake. And I would pay him with dollar bills. I would always pay him because I didn't know how much it was in change. I could understand him. Yeah. So to make sure they would chip me, or I would be chipped, or to avoid embarrassment, I would always pay with dollar bills. So by the time I got to New York, I was loaded with silver and pennies. Believe me.
You were heavier.
My left pocket was really heavy. Yeah. Well, anyway, that was it.
So you worked in the restaurant.
So I got to New York, I told you. And
the immigration people came and asked you why you'd overstayed your 6 months welcome.
Right, so I told them why, and they say that's against the law. You should have known better. You came here on a visa as a tourist for 6 months, and your duty was to report back and go back to Cuba. So I told him I took a chance on staying here, because I liked it here so well. So they told me that could not be, that I had to go back. But I had the prerogative of going back to Cuba, to Spain, or Argentina, wherever I wanted to go to, or Mexico. So they asked me if I want to go back to Spain. I said no, and I told them the reason why. And to Cuba, I don't want to go back either, because to me that Cuba would be like Spain. If I have to, maybe Argentina. So they told me, come back next week, next Wednesday, and come prepared to pack up and leave. So the following Wednesday, I was snowing. And this fellow by the name of McCarthy, he had his overcoat on, his hat on, smoking a big cigar. He was sitting on a swivel chair with his feet on the desk. To me, that looks so crude. Yeah. To see a man in, I consider to be a high office and a high official, representing the government and the culture of the country, and to be sitting like that with his feet on the desk, that was something I was not accustomed to see. So he asked me if I was ready to leave. I told him no. He says, well, there's no way out. You have to leave. You are not afraid one. Don't feel bad about it. You don't commit any crime. So I pleaded with him that I would very much like to stay here. Ever since I could read and write, and reading different articles about the United States, its politics, its economic situation, its justice for all. To me, that was the greatest thing I could ever hope to hear, and that I would like to be part of it. So he stood there, pulled his cigar, and he went into another office, and he talked to another 2 guys. So finally, the whole 3 of them came back, and they kept on asking me more questions. You know, you can't find money here like some people think that you can find money in the sidewalks, as I know that. You have to work for it. And I'm quite prepared, willing and ready to work for a living. So then they talked to each other quietly. I can understand in English everything they were saying. So finally one of them says, well, McCarthy, he says, if we were to allow you to stay here a little bit longer, what would you do? Just what I'm doing, work, mind my own business, and try not to avoid getting in trouble of any kind. And if I was allowed to stay here, I would gladly become an American citizen, marry somebody, have a family, and live here for the rest of my life. So they decided to, this fellow McCarthy, he looked to the other and said, what can you do with this guy? So they were like that. So he said, look here, this country needs fella like you. We are willing to let you go back and stay here for a little bit longer. But try not to get in trouble and do what you said you would do. Work, mind your own business, become a citizen, and then whether you want to get married or not, that would be a lot. This is a free country. That would be up to you.
Yeah.
So I thank him, and then he says, get out of here and go out and get lost. I took it for granted that, you know,
Literally.
that I was free.
Yeah.
So I went back to it. That's what we did. Yeah.
Well, where did you meet up with your father again, and when did you first get married?
Well, I met up with my father. My father knew I was here. So 2 months after I was here, I wrote him a letter. He was in Newburgh, New York.
Oh, you knew that?
Yeah, I had the address. Well, this address was to a bank in Wall Street.
Yeah.
Leonelio Pereira. It's a very big outfit now.
Yeah. Was that part of your motivation to get to New York, to see your dad again?
No. My father was no worry to me. The further away from him I could be, the better I would like it. No, I wanted to be on my own.
Yeah.
Because he was domineering, and I respected him. I knew I had to. But then,
you had to make it on your own.
After all these other skirmishes, I more or less gained enough confidence on myself to talk back to him if I had to.
And what was the name of this bank through which you would contact him?
I wrote to him through this bank, because this bank,
What's the name of the bank?
Leonelio Pereira. They are well known, it's a big bank. Yeah, Pereira. They have representatives, runners, going through all these out-of-the-way towns and collect names and addresses of Italians, Greeks, Spaniards, and so on, even Englishmen. And because they would send money to the other country through them. And then they would, because they would, being in construction, they move from place to place.
Yeah.
So to avoid the mail going astray, they advised them to have their addresses directed to the bank, and then the bank would follow them wherever they wanted. That's how it was.
Yeah.
So I wrote to my father. Through the bank. The letter went to Newburgh. My father had a box, mailbox there, and he would go to the box maybe once a month.
Yeah.
So finally, he went to on Saturday afternoon, going home from the shipyard in Newburgh. He stopped. Him and my cousin Frank. They stopped at the post office, and they found my letter.
Yeah.
So that same afternoon, that same night, he came to New York. This was not a Saturday; it was some day of the week, because the next day he had to go to work.
Yeah.
So they came during the night, got into my room. They were given permission to get to my room, and we were talking. So finally, he said, "Well, why did you let me know? Why did you tell me? What's the idea?" I said, oh, well, I don't want to bother you. So he said, well, pack up and let's go. I said, go where? Back with me to Newburgh. I'm not going anywhere with you. Well, I was a little more diplomatic than that. I said, well, Pop, it's like this. Since I've been here, I noticed different individuals that I met from our hometown that have been here for 10, 15 years. And I don't think they speak as much English as I do right now. And consequently, they have to avail themselves of whatever they can get.
Yeah.
Pick a shovel work, or shoveling coal in ships, or working on roads, or whatever. I think that if and when a foreigner manages to speak the language, he can find a better way of earning a living. Easier than working like that. So my cousin interrupted. My father says, the boy is right, Gene is right. Leave him alone. He could see that I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And I was determined not to go. So my father insisted. I said, no, Papa, I'm not going. I like this job. And I'm in constant contact with English-speaking people, and that's just what I want. So he got mad, and they left. But then I went to visit him.
Yeah.
I would go and visit him.
Did you ever work with him?
Yes. 3 years later.
Okay, so you worked 3 years later with him?
Well, after being in the hotel for 3 years.
You could speak English pretty well by then, I
I
guess.
could speak a little bit, enough to get by. And living in New York to me at the time was getting to be more of an hindrance than anything else. So I decided to leave it against my manager's advice. He told me I came from Germany, a young greenhorn like you, I'm the manager of this hotel. And you're learning English, you speak Spanish, this company is going to expand and build hotels all over the world.
Yeah.
You would go places if you stick to them. But I couldn't see that far ahead, so I decided to leave. I wanted to get outdoors. I was sick of living in the city and working in a hotel.
Yeah.
People smoking, all that. I was getting fed up with it. And I was getting shot,
Yeah.
and that I don't like.
So you went to work for your
So I
with your
decided to
dad?
go work with my father.
When did you meet your wife?
Well, that was years later.
Really?
Yes.
Before adopted.
So tell us about in between then.
Yeah.
How it go
Tell me about
chronological order.
the Storm King Highway.
Well, that's something else. But,
How did you get the
working
work?
for Pop?
You were working in the road work? Is that a construction crew? Building roads? What sort of jobs?
my father was then, after the war, the need for the construction of ships ended.
Mhm.
So this was working for Bethlehem Steel.
Yeah.
They stopped building ships. So he got back into the New York Highway Department. And there was then the through $48 million grant by the U.S. Congress to New York State. But they were able to finish that 9W road. It was built up to West Point, New York, and down to Newburgh, New York. There was about 12 mile
Yeah.
piece there that had to be built, but there was not enough money left to finish it because it was too costly. It starts down at the bottom of West Point, goes around a mountain, goes down the mountain, comes up again, with these men carrying a step
Yeah.
on the side of the mountain and all the way around the mountain, down and up and down, all the way up to Newburgh. So that's what I worked with him. Till November.
What year was that?
This was 1920,
Woodrow
Three.
Wilson gave him the grant, didn't he?
1923.
So you still hadn't become a. When did you?
Well, I was not a citizen
Yeah.
then yet. So in the fall of November of 1920, at the end of October 1923, 3 or 4,
Yeah.
I don't remember now. I came to Newark to visit a cousin of mine by the name of Martin, you know him.
Newark, New Jersey.
Newark, yes. And I told him that what I was doing. He asked me how much I was making. I told him that was only half of what he was getting, doing the same kind of work in construction, building, constructing buildings.
I see.
So he asked me, why don't you come on down and I'll get you a job. I'll get a foreman to give you a job. You join the union and you'll be making as much as I do. So I did. Came to Newark. Worked in Newark for about a month. We finished a building in a place called Belleville. That is now, that same building is where they make these English muffins.
Oh, really?
That's right.
Thomas English muffins?
Yeah. So we finished the building, and this John W. Ferguson, building contractors, had a contract with General Motors to go to Buffalo, New York, to construct an assembly plant, a Chevrolet assembly plant. That plant is in existence today. It's about a mile long on Route 20,
In Buffalo?
outside of Buffalo,
Yeah.
on this side of Buffalo. Well, the little bit I knew about the weather conditions in Buffalo in the wintertime, it didn't appeal to me.
Oh, yeah.
So this cousin of mine, he said, well, you're coming along, aren't you? I said, well, I don't know. Well, you know, the company's good to us, it's paying us for being idle for 2 weeks, so they will go with them. So don't be foolish. I said, okay, well, in the meantime, I think I'll take a ride down to Trenton, New Jersey to visit some friends of mine that work there in some kind of a factory. So I got on the train and I came to Trenton. And there I met these two fellas. They were working in a ceramic plant, making, these urinals that you see in
Commodes, yes. In the bathrooms, on the wall.
Men's toilet.
men's toilets and
Yeah.
hotels and railroad stations and airfields and
Yes.
so on. Bathtubs,
Uh-huh.
that's what they were making. So I got talking to, I asked for permission to go up to the second floor and talk to them. Permission was granted. The foreman came down, took me up, and he told me this, here they are. So we shook hands and one thing and another. And they spoke very poor English, but they were good mechanics. So this fellow, Chankin was his name, Pete Chankin, Scotchman. He asked me, he says, do you do the same kind of work? Do you know anything about this kind of work? I says, no, not on the bench. I know something about ceramics. All right.
Yeah.
But I was never allowed to work on the bench. He said, well, how come? So I told him. My grandparents had a ceramic plant in Spain. That plant's still in existence, incidentally.
And this is your mother's side or your
Yeah,
father's side?
my mother's side.
Where in Spain is the business? What city you told?
Thorough. And I said, being a member of the family, I was not allowed to, work on the bench. But I did do a lot of tinkering in the lab, making different.
What did they make, pottery there? I mean,
At the time they were making solid brick and perforated brick and these half round tiles that you see
on the roofs.
on the roof.
Yeah.
Today they do beautiful work there now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But in those days there was all crude rough stuff.
Yeah.
So he became very interested. He says, well, I think, are you in a hurry? I says, no, I'm going to stay around till these fellows quit at 5:30. And I'll go home with them. I'll stay with them overnight. Tomorrow morning I will go back to Newark. So he said, well, good. He said, Mr. Reed, the superintendent, is out now, but he should be back in about 30 or 40 minutes. And I would like to have you wait and talk with him, because he might be willing to give you a job.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, I'll wait. So I waited, and Mr. Reed came in, and he introduced me to him, and he told him what I had told him, and Mr. Reed right away became interested, more so than I thought, or I expected. And he asked me to come on down to my office. Will you come down to my office? I said, Yes. So I got down to his office. He sat me down. I sat down. We got talking, and he told me what the American manufacturers here in America were up to against the Europeans. He told me that after the war ended, not war number one, the destruction of France and Belgium and some other areas was so great that now that they are in the reconstructing process, they needed so much ceramic equipment that they could not possibly furnish it on the basis of the way it had been done prior to the war, such as what we are doing here now. So they developed a method of casting. Now one man in one day can produce more in one day than he could before in a week. And that's what we are up against now, because he says they are not only producing enough to supply their needs, but they are already beginning to export to the United States. And the United States is buying it, gobbling it up as fast as they can get it. Because it's so much nicer, so much lighter, and so much cheaper. So for us to stay in business, we have to find a way of competing with them. So he told me, we have a young man there that he just came from Germany. I've been there 2 months, less than 2 months. He doesn't speak a word of English, he says. And I would like to get another fellow like him, and we would try to get quicker results out of two than just one. Besides, I would like to get someone that could communicate. I said, well, look, I don't speak German, and very poor English, as you know. So I said, well, you're right. But would you be interested in, being that you have some experience in working in the lab, would you like to work in our lab here with him? I said, well, yes, I would. And I did like the place. It was clean, warm.
What was the name of the place?
The Monument Pottery Company. So he said, well, when can you start? I said, well, before we get to that, what is the pay? So he told me, he said, well, your friends up there, and they are the best two mechanics we have, out of 300 people that are employed. They're getting 75 cents an hour. The foreman gets $1 an hour for 40 hours work. I said, oh, well, in that case, it's no use talking. Wasting our time, your time or mine. Why do you say that? Because I'm getting $1.50 on what I'm doing. It's not finishing. So, well, I couldn't possibly, got an ugly face. I couldn't possibly pay you that. Besides, how do I know you will accomplish anything? I said, well, that's a chance you would have to take if I did stay. So we kept dickering back and forth. So finally, he agreed to give me $1.50 an hour.
Wow.
He told me, that fellow there's only getting $35 a week. In Blaha. So on one condition, that on payday, if I'm not around, you wouldn't get paid, because I'm not going to give your envelope to the foreman, so that he can see that you are making more money than he's making. So you have to wait till I come back, but I'll see to it that you pay your money every Friday night, like everybody else. But if not, you'll have to. I said, well, that's no problem with that. So that's what happened. So he put me in with Blaha. Blaha going to speak English, and I'm going to speak German.
Oh dear.
But in 2 years we made a changeover.
Yeah.
So then Blaha left, went over to General Ceramics over in Perth Amboy. They were offering him twice what he was making of money.
Isn't Blah still a friend of yours?
Oh, yes.
Some star cookouts every year.
So I stayed on, but I was already, at first I was guiding the other workers on the changeover. Some of the old pressers that were used to work, they didn't want no parts of it. So they had a choice of quitting or staying. Some of them stayed, some of them didn't. So some of the other laborers that helpers, that had the inclination of wanting to learn something, they were only too happy to get into the casting end of it. And we succeeded. So then the beginning of I worked there for 8 years. Then the beginning of the Depression, began to show up in 1929. And during this time, I met Barney, Stella's husband. He was a mold maker. And being that he could speak Italian, and I could speak Italian, so I talked to him. So I took to him somehow. So he told me, he said, I live down the street. Sometime when you pass by, if I'm in the porch, stop in and I'll introduce you to my wife. I said, fine. So on Saturday afternoon, I lived a block away from where they lived. I was on my way down to Trenton, and there was Barney sitting on the porch, and he had Lara sitting on his lap. Lara's the girl that died. Looked just like Laura, yeah. So he called Stella. Stella came out, and I could see Stella blushing all over the place. So we talked and talked and talked. Barney went in. Barney was getting paved already, but she wouldn't dare leave.
Yeah.
So Barney went in, and that was it. Then the following day, the same thing happened. She was there. That porch was never so clean.
Yeah.
She was so when she thought it was time for me to pass by, that porch was always
Yeah, she's out there sweeping, you know.
So she told me that she had a
Did Barney know what was going on?
no.
No.
So she told me, she says, my mother and my sister, you know, she told me all the whole life history that they were in Philadelphia, this and that. They lived in Port St. Boyd, and they came to Trenton to work in this mining and foundry company.
Yeah.
My brother Ed, I guess you met him. I said, yes, I heard of him in the place. Stanley was always also working there. Joe was working there. And Billy Sinker, the brother-in-law, was also working there. So she says, my mother and my sister come to visit us every once in a while. Would you like to meet her, meaning her sister? When she comes down this way, I says, well, if she's half as pretty as you are, I'll be only too happy to meet her.
Yeah.
I could see Stella's face.
Yeah,
Don't
she
say
was
you.
beautiful.
So here now, the following week, Saturday, there they were, grandmama, your great-grandmama, and Jenny.
What's my
So-
great-grandmother's name?
Jenny,
I know that was my grandmother's name.
Yes.
What was my great-grandmother's name?
also Jenny.
Also Jenny. Oh.
So she,
What was their name?
Nowaski,
Navaski?
they went by the name of Novak. Nowaski was the name. Nowaski was by the second marriage, because Eddie and Joe and Stella and all the others were children of the first marriage. The second marriage, that was Sukowski.
Zukowski was the
Yes,
first.
that's
Yeah.
right. Then the second was Nowaski.
Mhm.
And then they were, Jenny called herself Novak. And her mother went by the name of Mrs. Novak, because it was his wife. So we met. I was in the grocery store there with Joe. Joe and I were very good friends. So there comes Stella with Jenny and tow. Introduced us, and we went to the show that night. I was going to town anyhow, you know, to eat. In those days they had vaudeville and movies all in one. So we went to the show, and that was the beginning of the end.
Oh,
When did-
the end.
When did you get married?
In February of 1924,
What date was it?
the 11th of February.
And at what time? When was Carmen born? She was.
25 or 26.
And you lived in Trenton then.
Yeah.
When did you start to work for Sealots? Or was it,
Oh,
was it
no.
the next place you worked? Or
No. When at the beginning of the Depression, I was living in Trenton. Carmen was born in Trenton. Florence was born in Trenton. Then that was the beginning of the Depression. Things were getting bad. And my father-in-law wasn't working. My mother-in-law wasn't working. They had a mortgage in the place, $3,500
In Philadelphia.
in
Yeah.
Philadelphia. So they suggested being that things were not too good in Trenton either, even though I had 2 jobs,
Yeah.
3 jobs.
Really?
I was working in the Monument Pottery when there was work. I was working in Essex Rubber Company making floor mats for the Ford Motor Company, and also selling cars on the side.
Oh, a used car salesman. Or
New
your
and
new
used,
car?
Chrysler.
Yeah.
That was when
Tell
the
them why you had to stop.
Chryslers came about.
Tell them why you
So I was
stopped.
doing good. I sold a car to Stanley. I sold a car to Senki. I sold a new car to Mihinevich.
Yeah,
From Mihinevich.
yeah.
And I sold several cars. You don't remember. Well, anyway, a load of, this was in 1925, a load of new Chryslers came in. And amongst them there was a roadster. You know what a roadster is?
Open with a convertible light?
Convertible top, trunk in the back, tires,
Yeah.
nickel plated,
Yeah.
cover tires,
Oh,
one
yeah,
inside.
they're nifty
Yeah.
looking.
A yellow looking car. What
Yeah.
a beautiful.
Yeah.
Black and yellow.
Chrysler or Cadillac?
Chryslers.
That's
To your lady. They were the big ones then. So the superintendent of the telephone company, this was in North Trenton,
Yeah.
a new section. They were how do you say it, installing telephone poles along the streets and the roads. And the depot where they had all these lumber, all these posts piled up,
Yeah.
was near this place where the cars were being sold. So one day at lunchtime he stopped in, he looked at the car, he said, I like that car. I said, you should. Is it for sale? I said, of course. How much is it? So I think it was $1,800.
Yeah.
$1,800. Cash, he says.
Of course, they had a $3,500 mortgage on their house, so it's half the cost of the house.
Yeah, well, that had nothing to do with the house.
No, but I'm saying the
So
value.
he says, I tell you why I'm interested. I have a car, he had a Hupmobile. A 4-door Hupmobile. My daughter, an only child, is graduating. And it so happens that her graduation and her birthday come around the same time. So I promised her that if she graduated, that I would buy her a new car. And I know she would like this one.
Yeah.
I'll bring her over and see how she likes it. So she came over and she fell in love with the car too.
Yeah.
So he says, well, I think I'll buy the car on one condition. I said, what's that? That somebody from this place has to show her how to drive it. I said, that's no problem. I'll be only too happy. In other words,
I can see trouble coming.
it was also my duty, to when you sell a car to somebody who doesn't know how to drive,
Sure,
to
that's part of
show them how to
Yeah.
drive.
operating.
So this was in the springtime. So one day we were coming down Princeton Avenue with this beautiful shiny car that everybody stopped to see it.
Caught their attention, black and yellow.
And a
roadster.
blonde, blonder than you. She was pretty too. Sitting on one side and me driving at the wheel driving. So a lady that lived across the street from us, on Vine Street, saw us. So when I got home, your grandmother knew all about it. So she wanted to know what it was all about. So I told her. She didn't like it. I told her not to worry, that was part of the deal. I said, when you sell a car to somebody that doesn't know how to drive, I said, when I bought a car, the salesman took me out and showed me how to drive it. Well, all right. But she said, at least try to go someplace where the people will see you, because they don't know what's involved. I could see her point.
Yeah, gossip.
All right, so 2 days later, the same thing happened, because she had to go home first. I don't know what the reason was, but we had to. So to go to her house, we had to go by the down Princeton Avenue. So again, I don't know who saw us that time, but she knew it when I got back. So she put her foot down. She said, "It's either me or the cars." So what would you do?
Yeah. So where did you work after you worked?
So after that, my mother-in-law suggested that being that they were not working and they weren't getting enough rent to live and pay the mortgage, or at least the interest on the mortgage, that we should move to Philadelphia. That you could get a job in Philadelphia. And instead of paying rent, I was paying $65 a month rent then. Instead of paying rent, that money could go towards the amortization of the mortgage, and it's my house and his house, meaning my father-in-law's house, so that when we die, that house will go to you and Jenny. So things were not too good, so I went to Philadelphia. I went directly to these people by the name of Galloway Pottery. I got a job. So we moved to Philadelphia.
What part of Philadelphia did you live in?
32nd, and we lived on Mount Vernon, 21st of Mount Vernon. And the plant.
That's where Carmen we were growing up. We've been there.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Okay, by the parkway.
So I started to work there in October, and in February, things got so bad that Mr. Galloway had to reduce his workforce. So I was in line to be laid off because I was the one with the least seniority. So when he told me about it, we were on the steps between the office, between the second floor and third floor. I worked on the third floor, and we were on the middle of the steps. So he told me the bad news. He said, things are not good, we aren't selling anything, so I have to reduce the workforce. I said, well, I can understand that. And, but why me? He said, well, you are the one with the least seniority here. What would you do if you were in my place? We have men here. The one with the least seniority besides you has 15 years with us. The others have been with us for as much as 30-some years. So what would you do if you were in my place? So I said, well,
That's hot. You weren't married anymore.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's hot.
So when he told me that, I began to think about the move I had made. So I began to sweat cold. That's all right.
I'll fall over there.
No, it wouldn't. So I told him, I said, Mr. Galloway, if you have 1/2 of the experience that I think you have, you can afford to lay me off. What?
Yeah.
I said, that's right. Well, will you try to explain to me what you mean? So I told him. After reading some magazines and reading something about the economic conditions, about the well-to-dos, because it was already happening, moving from the outskirts of Philadelphia, from the suburbs of Philadelphia, back into the apartment house. The Barclay building had just been constructed, the Rittenhouse Square, and another one right across from it, where the European Council lived. They were apartments. They call them hotels. They are hotels now, but then they were renting apartments out to well-to-do people. And I remember I was very interested in what was going on about these well-to-do people moving back to the city. So that came to my mind. I said, the kind of people that have supported you up to now will no longer support you because they are moving from their huge estates out of the suburbs back into apartments, hotels, and so on. So that for you to remain in business, you'll have to make some changes here. Some of the things that are, for instance, I pointed out a bird bath they asked. For instance, it takes a man almost a day to make that bird bath. By casting it, by making some modifications in the design and so on and so forth, they could be casted so that one man in one day could do more than in a week's time. Consequently, you could afford to reduce the price of those things by that much percent so that you could sell them to the drugstore man, to the grocery store man, to the lawyer, to the doctor, to the average citizen. because the way I see it, your only support from here comes from the water cans, from the pews, from all these huge, rich people, and they will no longer support you because they're dying out. And the younger one, these things came out of me with, I don't know how, but it came out of it worked. So he told me, he said, well, look here, I don't have time now to talk any longer. He had a meeting of some kind. And tonight, on your way home, stop in the office. I'll have my 2 sisters here, and we'll talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked till 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, got ready. I went down and I stopped in the office. So he asked me to repeat to his sisters, Grace and Mary, what I had told him. So Mary right away jumped up and he says, that's the very thing I've been telling you two for the last 5 years. Now there's a young man, I don't know what else she said, there's a young man that he can see, he can visualize, that was when she can visualize and see the things that I've been trying to tell you right along. I'm all for it. So Grace said, well, what do you think, Walter? She said, well, I don't know. It's up to you too. So the 2 girls agreed to try that, my system. So the conclusion of it was, I was at the 8 o'clock that night.
Yeah.
So Jenny had her supper ready. When I got home,
Oh dear.
and I was up to here with preoccupation,
Oh,
about the commitment I had made. So I couldn't even eat. And I wouldn't dare eat. She was pestering me and accusing me all kinds of things. I didn't want to listen. So I went to bed. You don't want to listen. You dirty these.
She figured you were out with that blonde girl with that black and yellow car, probably. She figured you and she had a rendezvous
Who
or
knows?
something.
So the next day, this was
Shame
it.
that neighbors put
Well,
this kind
he
of
told me, he
ideas
says,
in your head.
tomorrow morning,
Oh, he was in Philadelphia, remember?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
come in with your good clothes on. And starting tomorrow morning, you tell us what to do.
Yeah.
So the next morning, I didn't have too many clothes in those days. I put my better clothes on. She said, you're dirty, so you're not.
Oh,
What are you going all the way to go out with her?
Her again, huh?
So I got into the car and left. So she called up to see if I was working. Yes, I was working. So she called up again, and the guy says, did you tell your wife what? I said, no, I didn't. She was so mad last night that I just couldn't reason with her or talk to her, so I decided to keep my mouth shut. So, well, God, then I said, go home and tell her all about it, will you?
Yeah.
So I told her.
And she says, what are you doing home in the middle of the day?
So Grandma was happy. She was very proud. That's one thing I got to say. She was very, very flexible, very smart. And she was praising me.
Yeah.
And condemning her husband and the daughter for not giving me a chance to explain. I said, well, it doesn't matter. It's all over now. So we made a changeover. That's it. So I worked there for 12 years in charge of production after that.
So that would have been to the middle of World War.
Well, to the World War II.
Yeah.
So War II broke out, and everybody was making money right and left.
You still lived in Mount Vernon
And I
Street
was,
at that time?
yes, and I was still sticking around in Galloway, because in the meantime he committed suicide. Mr. Galloway committed suicide, and a kind of a lady friend that he had. So the story goes. So after he committed suicide, the Pennsylvania Trust Company had been arranged or whatever. Well, anyhow, they were the
Administrators?
trustees or administrators of the estate. So we had a meeting up on the 11th floor on the Packard building, 15th and Walnut, about what we were going to do. So they were talking about hiring somebody to run the place, run the business. Did we think it would be worthwhile? Who is in charge now? So Smith, that was the treasurer of Galloway's, said, well, Jim here is the one running the production, and I'm taking care of the sales, books, and so on and so forth. So the understanding was that as long as we were already doing it, that we could run it again and for 12 months and see what results we would show at the end of 12 months. So in 12 months we improved things an awful lot because we had big kilns that would take weeks to load them and unload them and fire them. So instead we decided to abandon the big kilns, at least for the time being, and construct a small one. It cost us $12,000. Something that we could load in a half day, fire in 24 hours, unload it, in other words, fire 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other one it would take a month.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time to fire these little things, small things that we were making then to stay in business because the big things were not selling.
Yeah.
So at the end of 12 months, everybody was happy. So we came to an agreement was made. By that time, the other sister had died. He had died, so there was only one left. That was Mary, the oldest one, and she was in the equivalent of a home.
Nursing.
Yeah.